Would you look any differently at something like the cloud that the Hebrews followed in the desert? Would you say that's something else, or is that just a cloud that God made?
As I said before, I would reserve the word supernatural for
Okay.
God, and specifically for the Father and His Son, His
Right.
preeminent Son, Jesus.
Right.
So that there is where I would apply the word supernatural. God, the maker of the universe, can do whatever He wants with it.
Right.
He can manipulate the fabric of time and space and do so easily.
Yeah.
And so, as it pertains to things that are done by God, as opposed to things that are done by the messengers dispatched from the kingdom of heaven, I'm looking at when you talk about God Himself, then all bets are off.
Right.
Anything is possible. I mean, if this is again the architect of the universe, He can do whatever He wants.
Yeah, He can destroy
So
it and remake it.
So to answer your question, I don't know what that was. It could have been anything.
Right.
Could it have been some kind of a technological thing? Sure.
Right.
But it could have been, quote unquote, supernatural, because I will allow for that word in my own mind to be applied to things that are directly involving the Maker Himself.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because I've been rereading Exodus recently while reading Birthright, and then now looking at it through the lens of what you've been saying, and like, oh, maybe the cloud just isn't a cloud. You know, maybe it's something else. It was an interesting thing to think about. And plus, Exodus is just filled with a ton of supernatural things. The rock, giving water, the Mount Sinai. There's so many beautiful images and things that happen in that book. But then you're talking about this kind of like it's taboo for a lot of Christians to think about the supernatural. I've experienced that a bunch. Down in Georgia, talking to a bunch of Baptists about UFOs. And you say something in your book, a phrase that I really like, and I was hoping you can tell the listeners about it, and its consequences, Sunday school reductionism. I think that's very interesting.
Let me think for a minute. In my book, I use the phrase Sunday school reductionism, actually, when talking about the term supernatural, because it's so easy for us, and again, coming from a Christian perspective, it's so easy to reduce these things, these stories, these events to bedtime stories, to just quaint stories that are supernatural, and everything is supernatural. And when you do that, you lose, you lose, I think, the explanatory power of better terms. And specifically, what I mean is that let's be specific to the UFO phenomenon. So the reason why so many Christians have a hard time, they struggle with the UFO phenomenon, is because they cannot contemplate a situation in which you have beings who are manufacturing and deploying advanced technology in the same way that we do, but that are not us.
Right.
They have a hard time understanding that because they're not used to approaching the biblical narrative in that way,
right,
from that angle. And the reason why I think that in Sunday school reductionism, I would associate that with what I would describe as a medieval perspective of the world. And a lot of Christians are stuck in a medieval perspective of the world. And from the medieval's perspective, there's only a few characters in the game. And this is something I had to deal with in my own. I had to modify my own paradigm, and continue to modify my own paradigm over the years when confronted with new realities and new information. And in the beginning, I realized that I was hamstrung with this medieval perception of the world that I thought was biblically accurate. And indeed, I felt I was constrained as a Christian through the biblical lens, viewing the world through the biblical lens, to think in the following terms. So normally, I would say, I'll use the word conventionally. We are, I don't want to say taught. We're not taught. It's not that we're taught. It's not that we're indoctrinated. It's just a product of being Western Christians and
inheriting
and
maybe?
having an unsophisticated view, I think, of what the Bible really is. We come to this understanding, let's call it, that there are basically four characters in the universe. There's, of course, God, who's at the top of the hierarchy. So he's at the top of the pyramid. He's the supreme being, okay? Then you have angels, They're under God. They're his messengers. Then you have demons, including fallen angels and all of that. And then you have men, mankind. That's it. 4 characters in the game.
Right.
So in the vastness of the universe, there's 4 different kinds of beings. And again, God being at the pinnacle of this hierarchy. Well, I came to realize at some point that that was absurd.
Look around. I mean, look around this earth alone,
it has
right?
to be.
Yeah.
I believe that I mean, and what when I started thinking about this, and it was quite an apropos environment to be contemplating this, I recall I was 19 years old at the time. I'm deep in the Amazon jungle. I'm standing by, I'm in the middle of nowhere, in the wilderness, by myself. I was staying with a hunter friend of mine in the jungle, and he went out to hunt, and I, in this particular occasion, stayed back in the camp, and I was sitting by this river called Sarah in English, and I'm sitting there contemplating this, and I'm surrounded in this effusion of life in the Amazon. Just everywhere you look, something is moving. It's just life everywhere, and half of it wants to eat you. But there's this life everywhere that's just, you're surrounded in a sea of foliage and all of the creatures and the sounds. It's never silent in the Amazon, and I was just sitting there thinking about this profusion of life that exists in that environment, in that tropical environment, in the Amazon jungle. And it got me to wondering, this is a fingerprint of the maker. I mean, if you believe in God, and particularly if you're coming at this from a Christian perspective, then you look at the earth, you look at the vast profusion of life, of organic life on earth. That's the fingerprint of the maker.
Totally.
He didn't make 1 or 2 or 3 different kinds of things. He made millions
maximum creation.
of different kinds of things. A vast profusion of life, a variegated life of all forms and all kinds. Some of that life, and if you think about it as a spectrum of consciousness, some of that life is over here on the lower end of the spectrum. Let's talk about this for a moment. So you have the spectrum of consciousness. Over here you have like an amoeba on this end, right? A single cell organism, like the simplest form of life. And then at the other end of the spectrum you have God, the most supreme intelligence, sentience that we can't even imagine. He's beyond our comprehension. That's the far end of the spectrum, you know. And human beings were somewhere over here, and angels are somewhere over here, and then behind us would be your great apes and your elephants and your dolphins and your whales and all of these other creatures. Dogs are somewhere in here, pigs that have a level of intelligence and perhaps even sentience that is such that we can interact and that we can have empathy for these animals, and they can interact with us, and you can form bonds, right?
Yeah.
But we can't form bonds with an amoeba, right? Because it's just not on the same level. It doesn't have the same level of sentience. Again, it's not close enough to us on this spectrum of consciousness for us to be able to interact with it on that level. And I think about just the earth in this regard, and it seems to me, and I'm going to use this word again, absurd, inconceivable that when we look out into outer space, there's nothing out there.
Right. It's almost
there's no other life out there.
Further along the spectrum you created right there, closer to God, or maybe closer to us, but on the way towards God, would be things not like amoebas, but things that don't interact, or we can't at least interact with. We can't see, like we can't have a relationship with them the same way the amoeba can't have a relationship with us. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Right. And we just can't see.
I'm saying that even here on Earth, we have creatures like elephants and great apes and things that are not us, are not as, I would say, extraordinary as we are. We can do things that none of these other animals do. We, for example, we have this innate desire to bring order to chaos. No other animal does this. No other creature on planet Earth does this. No other creature will organize their cage in any meaningful way, the way that we do it, with the same level of capacity, certainly, in which we're meticulous and we do it in a very what seems to us to be a very logical way. We're the only ones who bring order to chaos on Earth. And so we are of a higher sentience than these other creatures. Well, we're not the only sentient beings in the universe. We've already mentioned that there's these things called angels, these angelic beings, the elder race. They are also sentient in the way that we are sentient. And by the way, this ties into the image of God and all of that. But it just seems, as I said before, inconceivable to me that we look at the profusion of life on planet Earth, we see the fingerprint of God, but yet we don't project that same kind of, what would I say?
Like magnitude or
level of analysis when we look out into the universe. For me, it's very simple. I look at the Earth. If God made this place, then this isn't the only place he made like this.
Right. So
that's, to me, a very simple deduction.
Oh, yeah.
Because we know that there are sentient beings living somewhere else in this place called the kingdom of heaven. They're coming from this place. And this place, by the way, it constitutes a civilization. Mm-hmm. It has judges and courts and courtiers and it has a royal court and a judicial court. It has a standing army. I mean, it's a civilization.
Right.
And so this place exists. I believe that the kingdom of heaven has locality. In other words, it exists somewhere in the universe, maybe at the center of the universe, and that there are other places in the universe where life abounds. And this does not change at all the gospel of Jesus Christ. It doesn't change the narrative of the scriptures. It does not change the implications of anything. We're just hamstrung with a medieval perspective, with a medieval perception of the biblical narrative of the Judeo-Christian faith. And for whatever reason, so many people have gotten stuck there and have a hard time contemplating anything else. And so, having laid that foundation, now we can fast forward and we can think about what we were talking about, this idea with UFOs and who the pilots are and all of that. So for me, it's easy. I extrapolate out this idea that there is a kingdom of heaven, that in this kingdom they're doing things that are very similar to what we do on earth. Indeed, our systems of government are at some level a shadow of theirs, that we didn't invent civilization, we inherited it.
Right.
And so this stuff is going on somewhere else. And it was going on in that place first. In other words, what we call governance and civilization, this isn't the first place it happened.
Right. We're modeling it, inheriting it.
That seems to be a biblical fact. Mm-hmm.